may be around the world, and thank you for joining us once again on truth2u.org. That's truth2u.org. I'm Jono, and joining me in the virtual Truth to You studio all the way from Ireland is Jason of Spiritualbabies.net. G'day, mate.
This is my best voice. Good morning.
Jason's got a cold. Jason's got a cold. I'm suffering from hay fever, and we're both seriously medicated, so we better introduce the third party pretty quickly. And that is, of course, we're on Torah Pills. It's Torah Pills is what we're doing. And to help us along is Rabbi Tovia Singer. Hello, my friend.
That's good. And given that the two out of three of us are heavily medicated, I'll be taking over the show from this point. That's it.
You're in charge. You can drive this bus.
I can drive it. That's it. Okay, go ahead.
Before you drive this bus, let me remind everybody, it's the Let's Get Biblical. Why Doesn't Judaism Accept the Christian Messiah? Volumes 1 and 2. You can get a copy from Tobia's website, outreachjudaism.org, outreachjudaism.org. I highly recommend it. And it's only a couple of weeks away. That is Tobia's debate with Dr. Craig Evans. That is, the topic of that is Jesus the promised Jewish Messiah? That's on the 8th of November, people. So you got to be quick if you want to be there. It's at Houston Baptist University campus.
Yes.
The auditorium
and I should
has...
say, that's where I received my rabbinical ordination, so it means a lot to me personally. Go ahead.
The auditorium only seats 300 people.
That's it.
So if it's not sold out already, you need to be quick. It's a couple of weeks to register for that. I'll put a link on this post. G'day to Rachel Tan. G'day, Rachel. She's translating Torah Pearls into Indonesian.
Awesome.
Oh,
how good!
Fabulous.
Now, Tobia, how do you say g'day in Indonesian?
I haven't a clue. I cannot talk to these people.
You've been there for...
Let me explain what Indonesian really is. Indonesian is basically Akkadian on helium. It's basically some Semitic background completely on this sort of high-pitched sound, and I have no idea. I can't speak a word. I can't speak a word of Indonesian.
So you've just spent the last 2 months nodding and smiling at each other?
No, it's all with translators. The only good thing is that Indonesian has a very strong a Semitic background to it, so that they get the words. That means, and we may do it in this show, we're going to look at Hebrew words because it's exploding all over the place. So they get that because so many of the nouns of the Semitic language, which are in Arabic and in Ugaritic and so on, are also in Indonesian, so they have a much easier time getting this stuff. But Indonesians are at a very big disadvantage because, frankly speaking, outside of Indonesia, no one speaks Indonesian. And this is a problem, which means that the Indonesian people are entirely dependent on Indonesian literature. In fact, what happened, you won't believe this. How did I ever come to Indonesia? It's not, nobody's going to travel 12
I just assumed that you scuba dived all the way.
No, I didn't scuba dive.
I thought they'd just get into the harbor at New York and just off you go. By the way, that reminds me.
Yeah.
That reminds me, Jason, if you've seen the movie Waterworld, right? I mean, do you remember that? How many years ago was that? That was Kevin Costner.
You know what? I got a wind of Waterworld early, and I'm happy to say I've never seen it.
You've never seen it? I saw it. Come on, it was kind of like a Mad Max film in underwater, and
right.
And I remember, Kevin Costner, and he had those little gills behind his ears, and he could breathe underwater. And all I'm saying, he could, and he even had webbed feet. And all I'm saying is that I have seen, and I bet you've seen it too. I've seen a lot of photos of Tovia scuba diving underwater without a mouthpiece, without a mace. Right. I'm just saying. That's all.
Yeah. But you notice how good my hair looks underwater. No one can figure it out. You know, the first person, if you look carefully at the pictures, somebody mentioned a couple of months ago, your hair looks terrific underwater. If you ever see my pictures of my classes, my hair is flying. It's like I stuck my finger into a 220 socket. But somehow underwater, it looks like I just came from a beauty parlor. And now, so I'd never noticed. It never occurred to me. And so, but it's worth a person devoting their entire lives to studying me. And as it turns out, if you look at the pictures of me diving, my hair looks like I just walked out of some salon, and I can't figure it out. Look at the latest picture. My hair looks perfect. It's beautiful. It's unbelievable. I know
Not
what to
only
figure
that, but
out.
you don't have a mouthpiece. Now, how did you end up? How did you end up in Indonesia if you didn't scuba dive
So
there?
you have to understand what's going on in Indonesia. Okay, see, Indonesia is a country. It's first of all human. It's a human construct. I mean, it's basically 17,000 islands. They've been independent for just a short time. They were colonized by the Dutch, and what happened is many Dutch Jews came to Indonesia over the years, and others from South America and so on. They were fleeing persecution because it's not easy to be a Jew around Christians. That's just the way it is. So what happens is that these people had an awareness of their Jewish ancestry. They're living in a country, interestingly, where there's virtually no anti-Semitism because there's no Jews to be anti-Semitic against. So they don't even know what a Jew is. They have no clue what the heck a Jew is. So what happened is these churches were very interested in their Jewish, what's the deal with Jesus. And literally a synod of churches were gathering to decide whether they should believe in Jesus or not. No exaggeration. They
Just
want
based on the realization that there was an original. There's the Tanakh. What?
because obviously they're aware that there are Jews who don't believe in Jesus. They're traditional Jews. They're very drawn to it. But you see, Indonesia is a place where there isn't anti-Semitism because there are no Jews there. So therefore, it's not on their minds. That means Jews just, Jew, what's that? They know Israel. In fact, when I'm in Bali diving with the locals, if I say I'm a Jew, they go, "What?" Right? Because they're sort of a peasant kind of group. I don't mean that in a but they don't. Jew doesn't register. I say, so I have to say I'm from Israel. Oh, Israel, and then of course they pull out a 357 Magnum. I'm joking, but what happens is that they know because it's on the news. Because in Indonesia, Israel's on the news every day, and it's a predominantly Islamic country, so it's very anti-Israel. But they don't have access to anything else. They don't know anything else. But this group, this synod. I mean, what I'm saying, there are people who will say, "I can't believe it." They were basically orienting Messianic. Now, Messianic in Indonesia is very different than Messianic in Melbourne. It's not that they're trying to convert Jews because there's no one to convert. It's just they pick up this Christianity and they then impose on it or infuse in it rabbinic traditions and customs from the oral law, which they claim they reject, and they then say this is a more authentic thing, and which is very attractive, happens all over the Messianic movement, which is predominantly Gentile, who are drawn to it, not because they want to convert Jews, that's secondary. They're drawn to it because they're saying, oh, this is more original, it's more authentic. In reality, I talk about in the book, the Messianic movement is the most evolved, embellished expression of Christianity, but they bring in Christian rabbinic customs and so on and so forth. So these people, so therefore, when we talk about Messianics in Indonesia, it has a different connotation. It doesn't mean Jews for Jesus. It means Christian Indonesians who are drawn to a Jewish orientation. It's not this kind of aggressive kind of deal. So what happens is they're now wondering, should they believe in Jesus or not? That means these churches, Messianic churches, and they decide they need to bring someone who can answer their questions, and they bring in pastors from all over Indonesia, which is a very large country. It stretches as far as probably as certainly as stretches as far. If you go from Bali all the way to Papua, you're talking about distances that are as large as the continent of Australia. We're talking about 3,000 miles across. I mean, just huge. So they came, they gathered, and for 3 days I answered their questions. And after 3 days, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 churches, they just 168 people exactly, the last number. They want to be Jewish, and that's it. And they closed it down. The head of the whole synod said he doesn't want to be a Christian. The problem was they didn't have a Jewish Bible, meaning a Tanakh, a Jewish scriptures that wasn't Indonesian, because no one ever bothered doing it yet, because there wasn't enough demand for it. So they literally, you won't believe what they did. They took their their Indonesian Christian Bible, because they can't get Art Scroll because their knowledge of English is too weak.
Right.
And they cut it in half, and they just tossed out the New Testament. They just used the Jew.
Wow.
Literally, that's what happened. What they did. I mean,
Wow.
and then it all went from there. And I love these people because I have a special love for these people because there's no one here to help them, and they're hungry for everything. If I tell you, they just like little birdies when it rains. They open their mouth, they tilt their neck up so the raindrops will fall in their mouth. That's how hungry they are for Torah, and
That's
as
so
such, so Messianic does not. In fact, the only time in my life I ever taught in a Messianic congregation, in quotation marks, is in Indonesia. Because I wouldn't walk into a Messianic congregation, but I mean, for any reason, unless they said, we want to know why Jesus is not the Messiah. And that's what they did in I think in Brunei. What's the name? I forget the name of that island, where all the monkeys are. But anyway, so I did it because they're not Jews for Jesus. They're Messianic, but it has a different connotation. So it's been very, very exciting. And I teach Torah, and we're going on a tour. We have a tour of Israel going to happen.
Coming up
very
this
exciting.
November, right?
Yeah, it's coming this November, and we're going to walk right through the Bible. I mean, straight. I'm literally going to have a Bible, Torah, Tanakh in my hand. I'm going to read the scripture as we go to each place. We're going to go deep into the bedrock of Jerusalem, see every verse and see where it's right there. And it's going to see it, walk right through it. It's really something very special. And they're very spiritual people.
Very exciting. It's very exciting because these Torah pearls that we're going through, the Torah portion is being translated, and that they're getting that information. I'm sure Rachel is going to be very busy, but thank you, Rachel, for taking on that task.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on, comments. There were a few comments. Momoka07 said, "Thanks, Jono, on downloading and starting with this new season. It's never too much when it's about Torah." That's so true. Every single time I go through the Torah portion, I pick something else up. I find something new. Betty said, "What does she say?" Oh, on the Torah Pearls Facebook page. There is a Torah Pearls Facebook page, boys and girls. She said, "I love the new front pages." That's you, Jason.
That's me.
She said, "Who's doing that?" It's Jason. Jason's making the artwork for all of these. And so thank you, my friend. But that's who it is, Betty. It's Jason making these the pages. And Henriksen said, "What?" Oh, that's right. So Tovia, the question is, what commentary was Tovia referring to? He talked about a good Christian commentary that was honest. Do you remember that last week?
Oh, yeah, there are. No, let me explain this point. Yes, all right. So let me give you that answer. If you take a revised standard version, a new revised standard version, which was put together by Bruce Metzger, he's passed on. He was a devout Christian, but he was honest, and therefore, when you read Isaiah 53, the commentary says it's talking about Israel. When you read Isaiah 7:14, it says, "Behold, the young woman is with a child." That's a really honest commentary. If you read Genesis 1:26, so he was of course very famous at Princeton University. He was probably the one of the greatest New Testament scholars in the last century. So
people can find that on Amazon, or
it's anywhere, of course. New Revised Standard Version, Oxford. But what I wasn't actually using him. Because what I wanted to do in last week's show was actually take something a little bit more hostile. The ones I quoted from are not those. I actually want those that are really wild fundamentalist ones, not the New Revised Standard Version Metzger. I went to the Ryrie Study Bible. I went to Kyle and Delich. I went to the Liberty Study Bible. And, I named those off. So I actually wanted to take the most hostile witnesses possible because, of course, that sheds more light on it. One other thing we're going to do in this show, I hope, is that we're going to see a lot of what that "let us make man," because there is an implicit question: why does God only say "let us make man" in the plural when creating man? Why didn't he say when creating fish? Why? That means in Christian terms, this is a big problem, because in Christian terms, God created the world with Jesus, through Jesus. That's the prologue of John. So if the world's not just man, it should have been let us everything. So there's something very deep here, very delicious.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that actually, let me just read another comment, because this plays into that as well. Now, before I read that comment, Andy and Glynis said, we really enjoyed this. May Yud-Hey Vav-Hey, they've got the Tetragrammaton there, bless you all in this new season. Tovia, do the book. We looked on Facebook. Your photos are beautiful. And I must say we're continually learning, and listening today was no exception. Thank you, Andy and Glynis. Now, we did get another comment, and this comment, Tovia, was from Yeshua. There you go.
Oh, I didn't know he's listening to the show.
Well, he is. He listens to the program,
okay.
and he sent...
That's the best proof of the resurrection I've had all year.
There it is, because he sent a comment, and he says, you people are false prophets.
He'd know, wouldn't he?
He would know, but I thought that I can't remember making any prophecies. But he goes on to say, now, and this goes into what you were saying, Tovia. He goes on to say, only God created the heavens and the earth and made man in his image, not the angels. Nowhere in the Tanakh does it say that the angels created us. And then he quotes some wonderful passages from Isaiah 45, I am the Lord and there is none else. There is no God besides me. Very, very quickly in a nutshell, the us in chapter 1, verse 26 that we talked about last week, are you saying that the angels are co-creators?
So here's the part. There's more than just the angels here. You'll notice that when God created animals, that means those animals that are land animals, how did he create them? It doesn't say that like when fish, he said, let there be the fish, and the sea was filled with fish, right? It doesn't, but the fish did not come from the earth, did not have any earth in it. Right. Now, if we go to the land creatures, there's a very interesting thing. The Torah suddenly, which is right before the creation of man, it said that God created animals from what? From the dust of the earth. So therefore, when God created animals, and you'll notice this is going to tie into the chapter of Noah, that the earth, you're going to see a lot of language of the earth, the land. And in fact, only things that were destroyed are earth things, land things, not fish. As an example, what does that all mean? This is going to all make sense to us. So here we have man is actually made up, the Bible says it, of two substances. One substance is what angels are made from, and that is they're completely a spiritual realm. There's no earth in them. And then there's another part of a human being. What did God create us from also? He also took the earth, the clay, and he breathed into it the divine. So humans are, in fact, reading the text, the plain text, are a composite of two elements. That is, that we're made up of earth and we're made up of the very substance of angels. That means the divine. And we have both of them. We walk upright. Animals walk flat down. They walk with both feet on the ground, and they're close to the ground. We walk straight up. And therefore, the question is, how are we going to live our lives? Are we going to live our lives like the land animals? You have animals on your farm, and so on. So you know that, when you look at a sheep, you look at a dog, a cat, we get the dog. What does a dog want to do? A dog, all it wants to do is to eat. He wants to sleep. He wants to procreate, and he wants to be safe and comfortable. We get that whole thing when the dog is sitting there with his eyes up, looking for a scrap of food he might throw him from the table. So that means that's a part of us. That's the animal in us. It's not that the animal's in us. The part that the substance the animal is made of, the earth, we also are made of that. But Hashem breathed into it that spiritual divine realm, so therefore we're both. And herein lies the tension. This is a very critical idea in Jewish thought, in Tanakh, and that is we're torn between the spiritual, the neshama, and the nefesh, the part of us that comes from the animal. And therefore, let us make man. That's why in Christian theology, especially Joannian Christian theology, Jesus was involved, or through him, all the world was created, not just man. But if you're looking carefully at Tanakh, Hashem is going, when it comes to man, he's saying, really, he's summoning the angels and the earth and saying, I am going to create something that is essentially a composite of the both of you. And man has free will. Angels have no free will. And the earth, of course, is what we could be. We can act like dogs. We can act like animals. And in essence, we're going to find in Sefer Noach, we're going to find that don't act like an animal. God is going to permit us, interestingly, I know we're jumping ahead, but it just ties together so exquisitely. The man is going to be given, there's the 7 Noachide laws. I don't know why people object to this. Now, most people don't, but some people are, why 7? They're all in the Torah very explicitly. So we have one of them we're going to find in Genesis chapter 9, in this portion, that when Noach is given permission to eat from animals, which is very interesting, because Hashem is saying, before that, everyone's a vegetarian. So therefore, animals were like on the same plane. They weren't utilitarian. Now we can use them, we can eat from them, and so on and so forth. So now it becomes more crystal clear for us. And after all, we have saved the animal species, Noach, mankind. So therefore, now we have permission to eat from them. But now we're also told it conveys the message they're utilitarian. They're not something to emulate. So much so, the Torah is going to tell us, be careful, don't eat from an animal that's living. The question is why? What kind of all the commandments given to people, why did it say, and don't steal, don't lie? No, it's don't eat from a living animal. It's a very striking commandment of all the commandments given, and it's given before the Torah, which means given to all mankind. And the reason is, who eats from a living animal? That means, of course, the explanation is that we talked about it in a previous show, that of course there are these cults, there's these tribes that actually drink blood as it flows.
Drink the blood while it's alive. Yeah,
but there's something here, because it's talking about eating the flesh of an animal when its lifeblood is still in it. So it obviously means more than that. Now the question is, who eats or what eats from animals while they're still alive? Animals.
True.
That means animals eat. When a lion eats, or a Komodo dragon, they're eating the animal while it's still alive, but it's been injured so deeply, it's not completely dead. It's still conscious, and it's ripping its stomach open, and they go for the stomach first because they know that other things are going to be coming soon. And the stomach is all the organs, all the fat and tissue and so on. So if they got to move quickly, they go for that thing. They're disemboweling a live animal. And you see it in diving, you see predation all the time, where fish are eating another fish while it's alive, and they're chewing on it. And I've seen fish and sharks while diving with bite marks in them, but they somehow survived it. That means that in the animal kingdom, what they're doing is they're eating animals while they're alive. They don't sit and wait around for the animal to die. The only animals that do that are afraid of being injured while they're doing it. So then those animals will wait. But the animals are eating animals quickly. There's high-speed movement here, because when a lion is eating it, an alpha lion can come along and take it away. So they're eating quickly. That thing is still moving around. You can see it in the videos. So what's happening is Hashem is saying to us, you're not an animal. Get away from the clay part of you, the earth part of you, from which animals are made from. So that's what's going to happen. Don't emulate the animal world. And that's what's ensconced, that's so beautifully apart, umbilically connected to the commandment, don't eat from live animals. Why not? What does it mean? It means don't do exactly the method that all predators engage in, and that is eat from animals while they're still living. It's very exquisite. That's what's happening here. So therefore, God is basically, when creating man, the only creature that has free will, he's calling upon those two elements of the world. And we see the earth, this just is 2 verses earlier. Man is made of the earth, clay, and if you look carefully, you'll see that land animals are made of earth and clay, right? Are made of the earth. Fish not, and certainly other things not. But when it comes to man, man shares with an animal out. That's why we see a cat, a dog. We get it. We get that the dog is looking for a mate. A dog is looking for a nice, comfortable place to sleep, to lie down. We know that. We get it. I get you, little doggy. If I were you, I'd be doing the exact same thing. You understand? Sure. So that's what's really happening here, and that's why we're going to, as we survey this chapter, it is impossible to understand it completely without understanding the first chapter. Man, and that's why it is the land creatures, humans included, that are destroyed. Fish are not affected by this at all.
That's fascinating. And so we are in Noach, and it is Genesis chapter 6, verse 9 to chapter 11, 32, verse 32, the end of 11. And it is the story of Noah and the ark. And while we're talking about the animals, Tovia, it begins with Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. It goes on to say that all flesh had become corrupt on the earth. God says, "Had it with you guys, going to flood the earth," but chooses Noah and says, "I want you to make an ark." And he says in verse 18 of chapter 6, he says, "I will establish my covenant with you." And this is the first time I believe that the word covenant is used. Is used in the Torah in verse 18. And then he goes on to say, "And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark and keep them alive with you, and there shall be male and female," and so on and so forth. Now, when we go a little bit further, Tovia, there becomes a little bit of a problem in chapter 7, verse 2. It says, "You shall take with you 7 of every clean animal, male and female." And seems to be is there an apparent contradiction here? What's going on?
It would. If the Bible stopped there, we would be perplexed. But the answer, of course, comes after the flood ends and so on. That Noah brings sacrifices, and he's only obviously going to bring from the clean animals. He's going to bring sacrifices. So therefore there are 2 sets. One is male, female, to preserve the species, and it says that explicitly in Torah. The 7 clean animals, and of course this raises a very interesting question, which I know is coming in a moment. The 7 clean animals, those are for sacrifices, because I don't need to explain that if Noah took these 2 animals from which the entire species is going to continue and brought a sacrifice, that will be the end of the whole species. So there's 2 types of animals that are brought here. That's correct. But this, of course, raises a very intriguing question.
It does. It does. And that is, of course, that we find out at Mount Sinai. We find out much later in the Torah what is clean and what is not clean. What is it? It's Deuteronomy chapter 14, Leviticus chapter 11. Is that right, if I remember correctly? And it tells us specifically what is pure and what is not pure, impure animals. How is it that Noah has this information here?
Right. Our sages tell us, "Hischalta b'oraisa u'bori olmo." It's very beautiful words. It's in Aramaic, and that is that whenever someone creates, one creates from a blueprint. And you start with a plan, and God had a plan. And our sages tell us that, in fact, as God went to create the world, what he did was he gazed at the blueprint, which is the Torah. Hischalta b'oraisa. Oiraisa means from the word or, which means light. He looked at the Torah, and from that he created the world. which means that the Torah predated, and there are many examples of this, but no one prior to the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai, none of the saints ever ate pig. So what we see there is that they knew al pi kavola, which means that they knew already from the beginning that, in fact, they knew the commandments and precepts of the Torah. This was well known to them, and it was al pi Kabbalah, which al pi Misora, we'll use a word that people know well, and then, of course, it became known and outlined very clearly in the Torah. But, of course, Noah knew, and the Torah is fully silent on this, Noah knew Leviticus chapter 11, of course.
Okay. Jason.
When we go to chapter 6:13, God says to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for all the earth is filled with lawlessness because of them. So I want to ask Tovia there, what's the Hebrew word there for lawlessness? It's featured in 11 and in 13, because what I'm wondering is...
Yeah. Oh, so the word there is... Yep. Yeah, the word there, v'timolei ha'aretz, and then the word there is not really lawlessness. The word is the name of Israel's most implacable enemy, and that's Hamas.
Violence, right? That's violence.
Yes.
So in verse 11, I've got the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with Hamas, right? That's verse 11. Verse 13, God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. The earth is filled with Hamas through them.
Right.
Hamas equals violence? Do you want to elaborate on that?
No, this is a very plain word. In fact, it actually is a word that's used in Isaiah 3. It appears throughout the Bible. The word Hamas is a very common word. Hamas means violence. Hamas means wild violence. It does not mean that people went to war and they went to war and people killed each other, so there was a lot of bloodshed, but it was an organized, well-formed war. You don't find the word Hamas there. The word Hamas means wild violence where there could be no explanation, and it seems to be, and it is always self-destructive. Like Hamas is interesting. You know, the Germans, it's not that I'm trying to say who's worse than who. The Germans did not use their own children as human shields. You see what I'm saying? They didn't go and kill out their own people. They didn't go and slaughter. And in fact, in Nazi Germany, if people were accused of espionage or whatever, they were given a real trial and so on and so forth. Well, I don't know if I would say that they're, but there was a system of order. Hamas means wild violence. That means it's just explosive violence that really does not seem to have any purpose. It means that man is completely unrestrained. And you see that, interestingly, in the Yishmael, which we're going to get to. We're going to get to Yishmael. We're going to see that Yishmael is identified by the angel in his conversation in Genesis 16 with Hagar, that it says there that his hand is going to be against his own brethren. It's going to be against everybody else, which means we're dealing with, and it says he's a wild beast of a person. And really, he is a wildness that is in the shape of a person. So therefore, Hamas is a kind of word that conveys mindless violence of absolute treachery that doesn't even seem to have any reason. There is no even symmetry of organization whatsoever. And this, incidentally, is the opposite of Amalek. Amalek, our sages tell us, how do you identify Amalek? It's very interesting, if I may digest. This is a very interesting thing. So we know that after Sancherib, the Assyrian king, his method for conquering countries was that he, very brilliantly, he moved populations. People in Australia are very patriotic. I imagine like America. So if someone conquered Australia, another nation did, if Russia, whatever, or the North Korea. So people in Australia would still continue to fight to regain their country back, right? So Sancherib was very aware of this. What did he do? When he conquered a land, he removed the entire population, and he took another population from another land that he he conquered, and he changed populations. He moved them around. That's how the 10 northern tribes were lost. Why are they lost? Because they weren't just conquered, they were carried away. Incidentally, who replaced them? Remember, I told you that who replaced the Samaritans, exactly. That's why the Talmud says, V'sanchev uvilvul eskol ha'olam kulo, which means that Sanchev essentially homogenized the whole world, where people lost their identities. From that point, we really just don't, it became more difficult to identify what nation. The only peoples that retain their national identity are those that the Bible said would, and that is the Jews and the Bnei Yisrael and the Bnei Yishmael, the Arabs and the Jews. And to this day, these are the only two biblical nations that have their identity are those two, because the Torah says so. It's very, very simple. But the Gemara says, but this creates a problem, because we have in the Torah, it's a very interesting thing. The Torah commands us, one of the 613 commandments is to destroy and to kill out Amalek, to kill it out, right? So the Gemara deals with the questions, how do you know someone's from Amalek? Because there are bad people from other nations. This is very interesting. So the Gemara says that a identifying feature of Amalek is that he doesn't do things in a violent way, but really he not only uses organization to kill God's children, but he does so using a legislative system. He always sets laws, and using those laws, he then sets out to kill the Jews. I'll give you an example. Something very peculiar about the book of Esther. When Haman, for no reason, wants to kill out the Jews, and that's also the nature of Amalek. Amalek is, there's no reason. Well, what do you got to do? What does some idiot in England want to go and support Palestine? For what? I'm not saying they are, but it's just, what has it got to do with you? Not only that, Europe is going down because of its Islamic population. But it's very interesting that when Haman wanted to destroy the Jews, he could have just said, he had all the power. He said, go kill the Jews. Or he could have said, the Jews are such terrible people. No. What he did was, instead, is he created a series of laws. Let us create laws which the Jews will then have violated, and then based on those system of well-formed laws, we can then go and kill the Jews. You notice that? He didn't have to do that.
Let me get this straight. Laws against the Jews, set in place laws that disadvantage the Jews. This is what you're saying.
Exactly, like in America.
This is fascinating, actually, because today is, the day that we're recording this is the 21st of October. And if I'm not mistaken, I think in 335, it was Constantine on this day that passed a whole lot of laws that disadvantaged the Jews, a whole lot of laws against the Jews.
Exactly.
And this is the same...
And this is the same thing. That means Amalek does not operate with Hamas. So we see that in November of 1933, we see that laws are passed. We see that Constantine initially, when he becomes a Christian, after winning a military victory on a bridge and whatever, in 312, he converts, and he becomes very, very anti-Semitic. He first begins with allowing Christianity to be an official religion, an officially recognized religion, and then eventually it becomes the recognized religion, and he creates a series of laws that makes Jewish life impossible. And in fact, it is in that 4th century that the last rabbis are left. Never go, what? Okay, so this is something, and that is that until that point, until the 4th century, every person who was called rabbi didn't just mean that he studied this and that and got an ordination. No, it meant that Moses ordained Joshua and the 70 elders, and they passed it on, and there's a direct link. And everyone who was a rabbi before that has this smicha, which means laying of the hands. Samach means laying of the hands, and it comes directly from Moses, and only such people could sit on the Sanhedrin. If you had a direct ordination from somebody else who had the ordination directly from Moses, is an unbroken chain, an unbroken link. By the 4th century, synagogues are being burnt down. This never happened before. Because again, understand, before Constantine, in fact, the most anti-Christian emperor is the one who was immediately before Constantine. And before that, Christianity was at times persecuted, but definitely not a recognized religion. Only 4 or 5% of the Roman Empire was Christian. at the beginning of the 4th century. But what happens then is a series of laws come about. Constantine passes a letter from after the Council of Nicaea. Most people associate the Council of Nicaea with deciding what the nature of Jesus was. Is he divine or not, or how divine was he? But in fact, there were many other issues that were resolved then. And one of the others is Passover. Everyone was trying to decide, should we have Passover on the 14th day of Nisan, the 15th day of Nisan, the Sunday of that week? This was a big, big issue. And Constantine, at this point, Constantine explodes with his, it's in my book, his letter is on my book. He says that all of this should be the filthy Jews, how odious people, the cursed people who killed our Lord. We should even look to their calendar to decide when. What happens at that point is something completely unique. And that is, now the anti-Semitism in the past was rhetorical. We've talked about that. So what? Tertullian was an anti-Semite. Didn't make a difference. He couldn't do anything to Jews. Jews were protected. But now synagogues are burnt, and now the Jews are being persecuted, and there's an effort now to eradicate Judaism by killing out every single rabbi. And again, the word rabbi had a much more formal meaning than it does today. That means every single person who had that ordination. And therefore, without the ordination, without such rabbis, we can't have a calendar. Because the calendar had to be blessed by the Sanhedrin. And that's why the modern calendar, Hillel II, is in 318. Because it is during these great persecutions of the Jews that, in fact, they realized the last vestiges of the rabbis who had ordination from Moses knew that they were going to be killed. They gathered. They based no longer on a visual, but now based on an algorithm, which we have in the oral law, and I talk about in the book, on an algorithm, a fixed calendar that's no longer based on re'iyah, on seeing, on sight. It's perfect within 1 day in 14,000 years. And they blessed it. And then they were all killed. And again, so it's laws. And it's, again, laws that Hitler's going to pass. Why did Hitler have to pass Nuremberg laws and so on? The laws and the laws. They just say, let's just kill everybody. Why didn't they never act that way? What's happening in Europe today? We're going to pass laws that we're not going to allow to import. We're going to pass a law now in the UN Security Council, which is coming up soon, to recognize Palestinians. People don't know how dangerous that is. Because once if a Palestine is now a state, a full-blown state recognized by the United Nations, if Israel then goes in to respond to terrorists coming from it, now they're not just going against an organization, they're going against a sovereign state of the UN, which means that the world has now a right to go to war with Israel. You don't realize how messianic this is.
So now let me get this straight. Let's just let me just pull the brakes on just for a second so that I can understand what you're saying. You're describing the difference between the Hamas people, the people of wild violence, and the people of Amalek. How do we tell them apart? Because they're both enemies of Israel. Right. And what you're saying is that they behave differently. Hamas is wild violence, whereas Amalek first begins by passing laws. And in the case of the UN, you're saying that they're collaborating, or at least they're
very carefully,
right.
and that's why.
But they behave differently.
Edom is controlling Ishmael. You know the Arabs can do it on their own. The Europeans are staying behind. They're the ones, again, passing boycotts and so on economically. So, but what if Israel violates now a sovereign state recognized by the UN? Understand what happens then. That means that the UN has the right to go and send its warplanes and its soldiers, its UN soldiers, against the state of Israel, and in addition to that, to actually make Israel into a pariah state, doing what it did to Iraq and to Libya, which means cut off, no Israeli plane can land in any other country. Exactly what it did to Libya when it won. So understand what's at stake here. What is forming, what is gelling before our eyes now. This is not small. This is all messianic. The word Edom and Ishmael are creating a confederacy using laws, and the Arabs wouldn't do this. The Arabs just go and kill people. They shoot rockets into nowhere. And it's interesting about, again, the Arabs is They shoot rockets into, where are they shooting rockets? They don't shoot rockets specifically into military bases, Israeli military. They shoot at civilian areas. Why? It's stupid. It means it doesn't even make sense. If they're smart, if they weren't Hamas, they weren't wild, they would want to injure Israel's military abilities. The fact is, by shooting a rocket into an apartment building does nothing to affect Israel's military capability.
And they're indiscriminately shooting. In fact, I think almost 10% of the rockets landed within their own borders. And what you're saying is it represents the kind of wild violence that it talks about here in the beginning of the Torah portion.
When we look at the Torah, you have to understand, listen to me, precious listener. We're going to examine words, letters. You have no idea how important this is. And I plead with you, study Hebrew, because you're going to see things in the Hebrew that are stripped in your English. And I'm going to tell you this straight away. And I don't care what you think of me. If you continue to study the Bible in English language, it's like kissing your father through a towel.
Ooh.
Okay? That's what you're doing. Okay? And if you want to put an end to that, if you want intimacy in your life, then start studying. Pray to Hashem, would it be? And in order to learn a language, you have to use the language. It means that you have to start speaking to others like yourself. Make up with a friend of yours who you talk to, converse with, and say, you know what? We are now going to only talk Hebrew. We're obviously going to have problems, so we'll go back to English, but let's have a program where we're going to start speaking Hebrew to each other. It's the only way you'll be able to acquire language is to actually use it. It's in life in general. We forget information if we don't use it. When we use it, that's when we actually remember it. So you have to use the language in order to know it. If you do, Hashem will help you. There's no way around this. This is the only way. The only way you could study this is by actually
immersing yourself in the language.
Yes, and using it.
Jumping now to Genesis 9, can we talk about the rainbow for a second? Because this is starting from verse 12. God said, "This is the sign for the covenant." It says, "It's a sign of the covenant which I will make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh, and the rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is now on the earth." And God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." Do you want to elaborate on that passage?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I mean, the rainbow is very important, because when do rainbows, when are they visible? Rainbows are water particles in the atmosphere, and then when sun passes through them, they disperse into their colors, their prism of multicolors. So therefore, what Hashem is saying is over here is that the rainbow acts as a covenant, and therefore Hashem is making a covenant, and this covenant is going to be the one that is going to be remembered by all. I mean, now, of course, when God says remember, it doesn't mean that he could forget and he cannot forget and so on and so forth. But the rainbow is there as a memorial to recall that what Hashem had done had wiped out all living beings, and therefore now, starting with a fresh start, we now can understand everyone's place on earth. That now we have a person who's righteous, a person who's unique. He has 3 children, a family. Families will continue from there. But if people are going to be punished, they're going to be punished individually. Nations personally may be punished, but the whole world will never be destroyed again. So this is the memorial, but it was always there.
Wow. Jason?
I live in an apartment in Dublin, and and there's a goat outside my window. No. That was weird. Did you hear that? That was a strange face.
I did. What was that?
I don't know. Anyway. I live in an apartment in Dublin, and I look out towards Dublin Bay, and in general, on average, I get at least 1 rainbow a day out of my window.
You're kidding.
Yeah, no, it's
you
true.
Don't.
Yeah, really.
What?
I do. And sometimes they're really big ones, and sometimes they're double rainbows. because it's a big body of water there, and it's nearly always raining or evaporating. So as soon as the sun's about to come out, or it's just coming out from behind a cloud, we get these glorious, great rainbows. It's really
Nearly
awesome.
every day you're telling me you get a rainbow.
Nearly every day, we're just in the perfect spot for rainbows. And I'm reminded then, when you're a child, you're told that this was given as a sign for you to remember. But I find it really wonderful that this is a sign that God is remembering. You're not really part of that equation anymore. When you look at that, you can say, well, God's faithful to his promises, and that's awesome.
So true. Right. So listen, we've got to wrap this up because we've really run out of time. But we cannot go until we address one more passage within this Torah portion. Tovia, if you help us out, I have heard probably 4, maybe even 5 different versions of what this actually meant, and I want to rush to Noah's defense here. Where we are is chapter 9, verses 20 and on. It says, Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Nice one. Actually, there's a vineyard on the farm here. And he drank of the wine, and I would too. And he was drunk, and he became uncovered in his tent. Now, I just want to say, just now, because I've heard a lot of people go, oh, Noah is so bad, and he got drunk, and he was naked. If I had a vineyard, I would happily make wine. I would happily drink the wine, and then after a while, I think I'm going to go to bed. Now, I go to the privacy of my own room. I don't mind if I go to bed. I mean, it can get hot here.
Jason does this every day. Is that a problem?
He does it every day when he's looking at his rainbows.
Doing it right now.
Wine, and then he's naked in his apartment. But all I'm saying is, if someone comes into my room, my neighbor or whoever it might be, and starts taking photos of me, now I've got a problem. Now, I don't know if that's what happened, but what we have here, I've heard a number of different explanations. That it goes on to say, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father. He told his 2 brothers outside, but Shem and Japheth took the garment and laid it on their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. What happened there? What happened? Is it really just a matter of he went in and said, oh, look, check it out, Dad's naked. Hey, have a look at this. Is that all that happened?
Well, the Torah is recording here a rather shameful event because, through Noah came what was essentially humiliated as a result of the blessing and the curse, which is a trend into this very day. And it illustrates that even the greatest people can become degraded and lose control of themselves. Wine, I looked up wine in the Bible because some Christian sects make a very big deal about not drinking wine and so on. In fact, the first person to figure out how to make grape juice without fermenting was a Methodist named Walsh, which is one of the biggest grape juice distributors in the world. And he was a Methodist who thought, I need to be able to do, but what happens here is that people can make mistakes. And even the greatest people can make mistakes. And therefore the focus here is on the children's reaction, not on Noah. That means the interest of the passage is obviously Noah made a mistake. And it is also the kind of mistake that was not an act of rebellion. And this is very important. That means up until this point, every single sin mentioned until we get to Genesis in verse 18, in these passages, every single sin or every single disgrace is a disgrace of rebellion against God. This, of course, is not Noah. This
is not rebellion. This is not Noah going, that's it. I'm angry at God. I'm going to go and hammer down my wine. I mean, has he really done something wrong? Because he's planted a vineyard. He's made wine. He's drunk of the wine. He wants to go lie down. He's in the privacy of his own tent. Really? What is he?
Well, right. That means that the Torah you'll see here is not. The Torah is setting up something that grapes, as it turns out, ferment naturally. That's just that happens to be just the way it is. In fact, it's very complicated technologically to to prevent that process from occurring. It's rather recently they figured out how to do it. So that Noah was in the privacy zone 10 and Shin. Of course, it's humiliating to Noah, but this is not an act of rebellion. And you'll see, is Noah punished for this? No. Is he criticized for this? No. I counted, I think it was 146 of 147 times in the Bible the word wine appears. I don't remember exactly. You could probably do it very easy with software. And I think only 8 of them are negative, where we're told not to drink too much lest we think. But almost all wine is a very positive thing. And the idea that wine is a bad thing is even post the advent of Christianity, because in John, Jesus turning water into wine, and if he was so against alcohol, he should have turned wine to water. So therefore, what we have here is that Noah has to be careful. It's certainly a shameful event, but this is not an act of rebellion. These are not there's no punishment here. I mean, look here, look at the text. Is Noach ever punished for this? The answer is no. And therefore, we know also that people make mistakes, but if they're not out of an act of rebellion, these are things that people could make right with God. People should be more careful not get drunk because one thing leads to another thing. And in fact, that this mistake, even the best of people could make mistakes. And as a result of that, it can lead to a much bigger problem. And the much bigger problem is that although, yes, Noach did debase himself, when he did this, but what happens actually is that if you look carefully at the text you'll see there that, and the sons of Noah came out, in verse 20, you see it says there, verse 20, Noach, a man of the earth, debased himself. Did you notice that? You see
is that what it says? So I've got Noah began to be a farmer.
Okay, it doesn't say that. Let's look at the Hebrew. Because then you see remember I told you when we first started, look carefully at these Hebrew words, because the Adam, Adamah, the ground which we are made up of, which we have to fight against. It's not really fight against. We have to direct it. That means drinking is a good thing, of wine, but in control. Being intimate with a woman is a good thing, but do it within the context of sanctity. And be intimate with your wife day and night, but it's not, don't go with, some other woman. Eat food, enjoy it, but make sure it's a kosher food. It's never this kind of Gnostic or Christian or Pauline, you should be like me, never be married, but if you can't control your urges, better to be, because it's better to be married than to burn. No, enjoy, but look what happened. The Torah is telling us where sin comes from. And again, when I tell you, and I say this to listeners, I really care about you, and I feel a weight on my shoulders. Why? The reason I'm able to do this is not that I earned it. Hebrew is my first language, and I know for most listeners it was not. And I feel therefore an urgency. I can't say God spoke to me, but in every fiber of my being says I have to give over the gift that I was given. So look very carefully at the text in verse 20. You'll see that the problems come from the ground part, not from the thing. So if you look at the text, you'll see there that the text says that that it's what yours says from the land.
It says in verse 20, I've got Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. But you're saying that he began to be a...
No, so here's the word. Vayochel Noach ish ho'adamo, which means that Noach was
a man of the earth.
A man of the earth. That means the earth part was sort of, because Noach wasn't an angel, he was righteous, but every righteous person has urges, the same as everyone else, which means that the Ish Ho'adama is a very interesting thing. It means a man of the earth. That's literally what it means. Ish Ho'adama, a man of the earth, which means that when Noach is drinking to excess, you see, what's happening then is it's sort of the earth part of him is now leading him.
Gratified.
That's right, it's being gratified. So therefore, this is what's brought into view. The curse part is what's very interesting. And also, sweethearts, I just want to get into the Hebrew here, one little thing, and that is that Chum does not respect his father's nakedness. In Jewish law, a man doesn't look at his father naked, and certainly if his father's drunk, it certainly shouldn't be. But it says there, again, it doesn't, when it curses Chum, it's really not a curse. It's saying that Chum is going to be a servant to Shem, Yofes. It means, the word there again is arur, that God is hoping that if Chum lives among Yefes and among Shem, then what will happen is that light will come onto them if they hang around Shem. And conversely, as the book of Psalms says, Oy l'rosha v'oy l'shchena, woe to the wicked person and woe to his neighbor. Do not spend your time around those who are mockers and so on. Because an Eved, we talked about, doesn't mean a slave as those who were, they had slavery in Australia, which was very wicked sin, and they had it in America for even a longer time. That's not what it means. An Eved means you become part of the family. You assimilate. And that is the most important thing for the children of Chum. Because he asked the question, why should they be punished? It isn't really. What's happening is that the way Chum is going to get light, his descendants are going to get light, is they're going to be around the descendants of Shem, and therefore they will be imbued and infused with light. That is the hope for Chum.
So let me get this. Okay, so verse 24, it says, so Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him. Is it more than just that he looked upon his father when he was naked?
No, he didn't rape him. The Torah tells us very clearly that he went and he looked at him and then he walked out. The other brothers did the opposite. They walked in backwards and put a sheet over him. Okay,
so it's plain and simple.
Men didn't have sex with his father. I mean, that's ridiculous.
This is one of the theories that I've heard. So this is so that's what's happened, and he curses Canaan to be a servant of servants. He shall be to his brethren.
Look at verse 20. Vayomer Orur Canaan in Eved Avdim Yelechav. It says the Orur, and a very important type. Orur is always used, as opposed there are other Hebrew words, but when Orur is used, you have to have big blinking neon lights. Orur is used means that it's not really cursed, but Orur means the way we're going to make you better is going to be that you're going to be an Eved. Doesn't mean a slave, but you're going to be a part of the family of your brothers, and that's how you're going to become better. I ask you, the listener, and I'm talking to you who's listening to this broadcast, there may have been a time in your earlier life that you did curse Israel. Maybe in an early time of your life you did not care about what the Jews had to say. And it could be that maybe you began to see the suffering of the Jewish people. Maybe you began to see how the nation of Israel suffered so deeply, and you went, you know what? I'm not going to go, they were punished because of their evil, like the church father said. No, I'm going to say that maybe I need to listen to these holy people. And what happened was you were healed through our suffering. And that's why, interesting, after that, everyone always says, how are people healed by the suffering of the servant? The answer is, how many people would be listening to a show like this in the mid-19th century? No one. Anti-Semitism ran and so on. But something happened after the Holocaust. The Jews suffer in the worst crime perpetrated in human history, and now the number of people who are converting to Judaism, become B'nai Noach, which was unknown 100 years ago, suddenly happening. What? It's through your wounds we are healed. Ooh, you see what's happening here? So that it's I'm not making it up. How many of you saw a show, Schindler's List or whatever, and said, you know what, I have to rethink everything here? Doesn't mean you left Christianity, but suddenly realizing the suffering of Israel. You know, Christians, they see bombs, rockets, they see the United Nations cursing Israel, and they go, you know, these Jews aren't bad people because they're on the right side and they're suffering terribly. I want to learn more. In fact, I would posit that more non-Jews start their path towards the God of Israel because it was sparked by the suffering of the servant.
I can easily believe that, Jason.
Powerful stuff. I'm psyched about this week. It's been a long show. We've covered an awful lot of stuff. But really, for me, the two most exciting lines are way down the end there, and 4 lines through 26 to 31, when we get the beginning, the first page of the story of Abraham.
And that's what's coming up. Lech Lecha. That's going to be next week.
I want to just one thing I say on this. I know we're over time, and I don't care because it's not my electricity. I just want to notice this one thing, and that is God creates fish. I think our first show we ever did, the first show ever we did, I hated you. No, I'm kidding. The first show we ever did, the first thing I ever read was from Genesis chapter 1, talking about fish life and marine life and my diving. That's how we began. It's very interesting. The Torah doesn't talk about fish anymore, you see? So what happens is we have a whole world, fish, thousands, the most numerous. There are more species of fish than there are of all other animals except for insects combined. We never Torah doesn't interest the fish. The Torah then zooms in, like a Google Earth. You then zoom in on one, and so the Torah zooms in on Noach. The whole world is not, and then it's going to come to Abraham, and that's what happens at the very end here. The Torah then is now zooming in on one person. The Torah is not a history book, my friends. The Torah is, well, the word Torah means instructions, is telling us how to live our lives, and therefore there's going to be this one man, and just like today, one Israel, one little nation, and this one little nation can change the world, and it can change you too. And therefore, and again, I say to you, those of you who think about Isaiah 3, how many of you have turned to God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because of a nagging feeling, because of the suffering of the servant? By his wounds we were healed. Anyways, I'm very grateful that we were able to do the show together. I hope more than anything that in some way we all have now caused every one of us to say, you know what? That make up in your mind you're going to study Hebrew, but know this, you will not know the Hebrew unless you use the Hebrew. Start praying to God in the Hebrew language. Have with a friend and say, we're going to start to try to speak Hebrew, and do that. And that's how you do that's how the only way you'll acquire it.
Rabbi Tovia Singer, outreachjudaism.org is the website, outreachjudaism.org. You've been listening to Torah Pearls, Season 2 of Torah Pearls. Jason of Spiritualbabies.net, thank you, my friend, for coming back on, even though you have a terrible cold. I hope you're better for Lech Lecha, which is where we're going next week. In the meantime, dear listeners, be blessed, be set apart by the truth of our Father's word. Shalom.